doctrine of creation stands as one of the most foundational truths ever revealed to humanity. It is not merely a detail of religious interest, but the very root from which springs our understanding of life, morality, purpose, and destiny. To lose our grip on this truth is to unravel the coherence of nearly every other biblical teaching, from the origin of evil to the purpose of redemption, from the value of human life to the hope of eternal restoration. Creation is not a myth. It is not an allegory. It is the declaration of a divine act by which all that exists was brought into being by a personal, powerful, and purposeful creator. Yet in the modern world, we are presented with a strikingly different narrative, one that insists that all life came not from mind, but from matter, not by design, but by chance, not by intention, but by accident. This narrative is known as the theory of evolution. It claims to explain the diversity of life and the complexity of the universe without any need for God. It posits that all things have arisen through a slow, undirected process over billions of years, driven by random mutation, natural selection, and impersonal laws of nature. This view, while often draped in the language of science, is at its core a philosophy, a worldview rooted in materialism and naturalism. Evolution, as commonly understood, is not merely a biological theory. It is a comprehensive explanation of origins that seeks to eliminate the need for divine causation altogether. One of the most misleading statements we hear today is that evolution is simply the method by which God created. This idea, though popular among many who wish to reconcile faith with modern science, is deeply flawed. Evolution, in its philosophical core, is a godless process. It does not require, acknowledge, or allow for divine intervention. It assumes that all phenomena can be explained without reference to the supernatural. To attempt to graft God onto this framework is to commit a fundamental error, a theological and philosophical contradiction. For if evolution is true in its full scope, then God is at best an unnecessary hypothesis. At worst, he becomes a distant spectator to a cruel and wasteful process. The tension between creation and evolution is not a minor issue. It is a matter that strikes at the very heart of who we are, why we are here, and what our future holds. Evolution, by its very definition, excludes the miraculous. It does not tolerate the sudden appearance of life, the creation of distinct species, or the intentional formation of human beings in the image of God. It replaces divine purpose with biological accidents. It interprets the grandeur of the cosmos not as evidence of a designer, but as the outworking of blind chance. And it redefines man not as a moral being made for relationship with God, but as a clever animal with no higher origin than the beasts and no higher destiny than the dust. This worldview is not new. It is an ancient idea repackaged in scientific terminology. In the 1st century, the Apostle Peter warned of those who would come in the last days, scoffing at the promises of God and declaring that all things continue as they were from the beginning. 2 Peter 3:4. He described a worldview that denies divine intervention in the past and in the future, a worldview that denies the flood, the judgment, and the second coming of Christ. Today, this denial takes the form of uniformitarianism, the idea that the processes we see today have always been the same and will always continue unchanged. It is a philosophy that leaves no room for acts of God and therefore no room for hope. Creation, on the other hand, declares that the universe had a beginning, that life was formed by intention, and that humanity bears the image of the Creator. It affirms that the natural order, though now marred by sin and decay, was originally designed in perfect harmony. This belief is not in opposition to science, but rather the very foundation upon which the scientific method was built. The early scientists, men like Kepler, Newton, and Faraday, pursued their studies with the conviction that the universe was intelligible because it was made by a rational mind. To believe in creation is not to reject science, but to reject the ideology that masquerades as science. Genuine science is the pursuit of truth through observation, experimentation, and reason. It is a humble inquiry into the workings of a universe that is far more complex and mysterious than we can comprehend. But evolution, as it is often taught, steps beyond observation into speculation. It asks us to believe that life emerged from non-life, that consciousness arose from chemicals, that morality evolved from survival instincts. These are not scientific conclusions. They are philosophical assertions dressed in the language of biology. Let us consider the issue of life's origin. Every living organism, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex mammal, is made up of cells, tiny factories filled with molecular machines, information storage, and energy systems. The DNA within each cell contains a code so sophisticated that it surpasses the capacity of any man-made technology. To claim that such complexity arose by chance is to suspend all reason. Information does not write itself. Order does not emerge from chaos without guidance. Every experience in the real world tells us that codes come from coders, machines from designers, and systems from intelligence. Yet evolution asks us to believe that the first cell assembled itself from lifeless matter without purpose, direction, or design. Despite decades of research, scientists have not been able to demonstrate the spontaneous generation of life. Experiments attempting to create life in the lab have only revealed the staggering complexity of even the simplest forms of life. And when confronted with the question of how non-living chemicals could arrange themselves into a living system capable of reproduction and metabolism, evolutionary theory offers only speculation. We don't know yet, but we believe it happened. This is not science. It is faith in a materialistic worldview. The fossil record, which evolutionists often tout as a cornerstone of their theory, tells a different story than the one portrayed in textbooks. Rather than showing gradual transitions, the fossil record is characterized by sudden appearances and stasis. The so-called Cambrian explosion, in which numerous complex animal forms appear abruptly and fully formed, remains an insurmountable challenge for Darwinian theory. There is no evidence of a long sequence of transitional fossils leading up to these forms. They appear as if out of nowhere, already equipped with complex body plans, systems of movement, and specialized organs. Attempts to explain this explosion of life as the result of rapid evolutionary innovation still rely on assumptions rather than demonstrable mechanisms. Moreover, this pattern is repeated throughout the fossil record. Major groups appear abruptly and persist with little change until they disappear from the record. This is consistent with the idea of creation, organisms designed and introduced by an intelligent creator, not slowly sculpted by blind, purposeless processing. Even more revealing is the inadequacy of genetic mechanisms to support macroevolutionary change. Modern genetics, far from confirming evolution, has exposed its limitations. DNA, RNA, and the complex network of regulatory information in cells do not arise from random mutations. While mutations can cause variation, they do not account for the appearance of new, functional genes. Studies in molecular biology have shown that the overwhelming majority of mutations are neutral or harmful. The likelihood of a sequence of beneficial mutations accumulating to form entirely new biological features is astronomically low. Attempts to manipulate organisms through artificial selection or radiation-induced mutation have not yielded new kinds of organisms. Breeding experiments with fruit flies, for instance, have produced various mutations, many of which result in deformities or reduced fitness, but none have transformed the fly into anything fundamentally different. Genetic entropy, the accumulation of harmful mutations over time, suggests that genomes are degrading, not improving. Evolutionary theory requires vast new information to be generated through natural processes, yet no such mechanism has been observed. This brings us to the moral and spiritual implications of evolutionary thinking. If we are merely the result of natural forces and random mutation, then our sense of morality is an illusion. Right and wrong become social constructs shaped by evolutionary pressures rather than grounded in any objective truth. But if morality is merely an evolved behavior, then acts of love, courage, and sacrifice lose their deeper meaning. Why should we care for the weak, value truth, or pursue justice? If survival is all that matters, then power, not compassion, becomes the highest virtue. The biblical view, in contrast, grounds morality in the character of a moral creator. Humans are not accidents, but image-bearers of God, endowed with value and responsibility. Sin is not a survival trait, but a deviation from divine purpose. The narrative of creation, fall, and redemption explains why we long for justice, beauty, and truth. It speaks to our conscience and provides the only coherent framework in which human rights, dignity, and accountability can be affirmed. Furthermore, evolutionary theory undermines the gospel itself. The Bible teaches that death entered the world as a result of sin. But if evolution is true, death predates humanity by millions of years. In such a view, death is not the enemy, it is the tool of progress. Yet Scripture declares death to be an intruder, the last enemy to be destroyed. The cross of Christ is not just a moral example, it is the divine solution to the problem of sin and death. If death was always part of creation, then the atonement loses its theological necessity. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is also deeply tied to the creation account. Just as God breathed life into the first man, He raised Christ from the dead as the first fruits of the new creation. The promise of resurrection and restoration makes sense only if the original creation was good, and if its corruption was a tragic interruption, not a natural stage in an evolutionary journey. The hope of Christians is not in endless biological progress, but in the return of the Creator to make all things new. We must also consider the cultural impact of evolutionary thought. It has shaped modern education, ethics, law, and politics. In many academic institutions, creation is not even entertained as a viable explanation. Instead, students are taught that science and faith are enemies, that rationality excludes belief in God, and that progress comes from casting off the myths of the past. This has led to a crisis of meaning. Young people grow up believing they are cosmic accidents, struggling to construct identity and purpose in a world that tells them they are nothing more than advanced primates. Yet in their hearts, people long for more. We long for beauty, truth, and transcendence. We ache for justice and yearn for love that does not end. These are not evolutionary illusions. They are echoes of our origin. They are the fingerprints of a Creator who designed us to know Him, and they are confirmed by the person of Jesus Christ, who entered history, lived among us, died for us, and rose again to offer us eternal life. Creation is not a relic of an unscientific age. It is the most reasonable foundation for science, morality, and hope. It explains the order and intelligibility of nature, the universality of human conscience, and the historical reality of redemption. It is not an obstacle to discovery, but the key to unlocking a universe that was spoken into existence by a personal and purposeful God. To reject creation is not to embrace science. It is to embrace a philosophy that cannot explain the deepest truths of our existence. The idea that everything came from nothing, that life came from non-life, and that mind came from matter is not supported by science or logic. It is a worldview built on faith in randomness and blind processes. But the Christian worldview offers something better. It offers a story that begins with purpose, is marred by rebellion, and is redeemed by love. It is a story that ends not in extinction, but in restoration. In the end, we are faced with a choice. We can believe that we are dust, animated by chance, fated for oblivion. Or we can believe that we are dust, shaped by a loving Creator, destined for glory. One vision leads to despair, the other to hope. One silences meaning, the other speaks of a voice calling us by name. The heavens declare the glory of God, the earth reveals his handiwork, and the heart, when quiet, still hears his whisper. Creation is not just an event in the past, it is a truth for the present and a hope for the future. It is the foundation of everything that matters, and it invites every skeptic not to blind faith, but to open-eyed wonder, to see the world not as an accident, but as a gift.